Queen Vexalia of the Zephronian Empire stood at the grand observation deck of her palace, her 7-foot frame silhouetted against the 3 setting suns of Zephron Prime. Her iridescent scales shimmered with royal blues and purples as she gazed out at the sprawling metropolis below. The city had been rebuilt after the war, but the queen had not. 5 years, she muttered to herself, her dual-toned voice echoing in the empty chamber. 5 years since those wretched humans took you from me, Lumina. The annual day of remembrance was approaching. Another year of pretending to be strong for her people, while privately nursing a hatred that burned hotter than the plasma cores powering her empire's fleet. Commander Drav approached with characteristic military precision, his boots clicking against the polished obsidian floor. Unlike the queen's ornate appearance, his gray uniform was utilitarian, adorned only with the medals from the Quasar War. "Your Magnificence," he said, bowing low. "The memorial preparations are complete." Vexalia didn't turn around. "Has Ambassador Grell returned from the Galactic Council yet?" "Yes, Your Magnificence." The humans continue to deny any involvement in Princess Lumina's disappearance. They maintain it was Drevlak pirates who attacked her diplomatic vessel. The queen's tail lashed violently, cracking against the floor. Convenient that no debris was ever found. Convenient that the only witnesses were human peacekeepers who arrived too late to help. Commander Drav cleared his throat, a gesture he'd picked up from dealing with human diplomats. "The official reports suggest." "I know what the reports suggest, Commander." Vexalia snapped, finally turning to face him. Her vertical pupils narrowed to thin slits. "But a mother knows. My daughter was the gentlest soul in the 12 systems. She believed in peace with the humans. And look where that got her." Drav remained silent, having learned over the years that contradicting the queen during her moments of grief was unwise. "Show me the holo recording again," she commanded. With practiced movements, Drav activated the projector built into his wrist device. A wavering blue image appeared between them. Princess Lumina, her scales a softer lavender than her mother's, her head crest not yet fully developed into the royal crown that Vexalia bore. "People of Zephron Prime and our allied worlds," the projection spoke, the princess's voice filled with the optimism of youth. "Today I embark on a mission of peace. The humans are not our enemies but potential friends with whom we share this vast universe. I believe that by extending our hand, or in our case claw, in friendship, we can end this senseless conflict." Vexalia's jaw tightened. Those were the last public words her daughter had spoken before boarding the diplomatic vessel that would never return. "Turn it off," the queen ordered, her voice barely a whisper. As the image faded, Ambassador Grell entered, his elder form stooped with age and wisdom. His scales had long ago faded to a dignified silver. "Your Magnificence," he bowed. "I bring news from the Galactic Council's latest session. Unless it's the heads of the humans responsible for my daughter's death, I'm not interested." Grell exchanged a glance with Commander Drav before continuing. "The Council has proposed a new peace initiative between Zephronians and humans. They believe 5 years is long enough for—" "Long enough," Vexalia hissed, her regal composure slipping. "You think 5 years is long enough to forget the murder of the royal heir? The destruction of our outer colonies? The thousands of Zephronian warriors who will never return to their clutchmates?" "Of course not, Your Magnificence," Grell said soothingly. "But Princess Lumina would have wanted. Do not presume to tell me what my daughter would have wanted." The queen's voice boomed throughout the chamber, causing even the stoic Commander Drav to flinch. "My daughter is dead because she trusted humans. I will not make the same mistake." A heavy silence fell over the observation deck, broken only by the distant sounds of the city below. After several moments, Vexalia's breathing steadied. "Leave me," she commanded. "Both of you. I wish to be alone with my thoughts." As her advisors departed, Queen Vexalia turned back to the view of her capital city. The war might officially be over, but for her, it would never end. Not while the humans still prospered in their sector of the galaxy. Not while her daughter's killers went unpunished. Little did she know that across the stars, her assumptions were about to be challenged in a way she could never have imagined. "Another round for the worst salvage crew in the Orion Arm," announced Jack Thornton, slapping his last credit chip onto the grimy bar counter of the rusty hyperdrive. The bartender, a gelatinous blob with 3 eye stalks, absorbed the chip directly into its translucent body and oozed away to prepare their drinks. The dive bar sat on the edge of what humans called the neutral zone, that murky region of space where jurisdiction got fuzzy and questions were considered bad form. "You do realize that's our fuel money, right?" Krunk grumbled. All 4 of his muscular arms crossed over his barrel chest. The Grillorian mechanic's orange skin was stained with engine grease, and his single cyclopean eye narrowed with disapproval. The junkyard dog isn't going to fly herself out of impound. Jack ran a hand through his disheveled brown hair and grinned. Relax, big guy. I've got a plan. Your last plan got us banned from 3 space stations and wanted in 2 systems. Krunk reminded him, accepting his drink, a concoction that bubbled ominously and smelled like battery acid. Minor setbacks, Jack waved dismissively. And how was I supposed to know that Venubian Royal was allergic to water? They're basically walking cacti. The truth was, Jack Thornton's life had been a series of minor setbacks since his dishonorable discharge from the Earth Space Defense Force 5 years ago. Captain Jack Thornton, once the pride of the human fleet, now reduced to scavenging space junk in a beat-up salvage ship with a grumpy alien partner who had even worse luck than he did. We need a big score, Jack said, lowering his voice. Something that'll set us up for at least a few months. Pay off Grix, get the ship repaired properly, maybe even upgrade the sensor array. Krunk let out a sound halfway between a snort and a wheeze. Sure, and maybe the Zephronian Queen will invite us to tea and apologize for trying to exterminate humanity. Jack winced. The Quasar War was still a sore subject for most humans, especially those like him who had fought in it. Hey, that's not fair. We didn't exactly play nice either. Your species does lack subtlety, Krunk agreed, downing his drink in one gulp, his throat expanding to accommodate the volume. But at least you don't hold grudges for generations. My great-grandfather still won't speak to anyone with vestigial wings because of some ancient Grulorian avian conflict. Jack was about to reply when his attention was drawn to a cloaked figure entering the bar. In a place where 3-headed gamblers and sentient gaseous entities were commonplace, someone trying to hide their appearance stood out like a quantum anomaly. Interesting, Jack murmured, watching as the figure navigated through the crowded bar, moving with a grace that seemed oddly familiar. Don't even think about it, Krunk warned, following Jack's gaze. We already have enough problems without you adding mysterious strangers to the mix. But Jack wasn't listening. There was something about the way the figure moved, something that tugged at his memory. I'm just going to say hello, Jack said, standing up. Krunk's massive hand clamped down on Jack's shoulder. The last time you just said hello to someone, we ended up stealing a shipment of exotic pets that turned out to be the larval form of a diplomat's children. That was an honest mistake, Jack protested. They looked exactly like Terran gerbils. They had tentacles, Jack. Very small tentacles. Their bickering was interrupted when the hooded figure approached their table. Up close, Jack could see that whoever it was stood nearly as tall as a Zephronian, but moved with a fluid grace that the reptilian species typically lacked. Are you Jack Thornton? The voice was soft, almost musical, with an accent Jack couldn't quite place. Depends who's asking, Jack replied, instinctively reaching for the blaster that wasn't there, another consequence of their latest financial troubles. The figure glanced around the bar nervously before leaning closer. I need passage out of the neutral zone. I'm told you're a pilot who doesn't ask questions. Jack raised an eyebrow. I ask plenty of questions. Like how much are you paying? A slender hand emerged from the cloak, placing a small but clearly valuable gemstone on the table. In the dim light of the bar, it glowed with an inner fire that Jack recognized immediately. Is that a Zephronian royal crystal? Krunk gasped, his single eye widening to the size of a dinner plate. The hooded figure tensed. Keep your voice down. Jack studied their mysterious visitor with renewed interest. Royal crystals were impossibly rare outside the Zephronian Empire, and impossibly illegal to possess without direct royal authorization. Now I'm definitely asking questions, Jack said, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. Starting with who exactly is hiding under that hood. The figure seemed to consider fleeing, then sighed in resignation. With a fluid motion, the hood was pulled back, revealing a face that made both Jack and Krunk freeze in shock. Lavender scales, a partially formed royal crest, eyes the color of distant nebulae. My name, said the figure, is Princess Lumina of the Zephronian Empire, and I need your help to go home. For the first time in his chaotic post-military career, Jack Thornton was speechless. Krunk, however, had no such problem. Princess Lumina, the mechanic sputtered, liquid dribbling from his mouth as he forgot to swallow his drink. The Princess Lumina, who supposedly died in the Quasar War. The Princess Lumina, whose death was the final spark that nearly led to the annihilation of both our species. Do you know another Princess Lumina? She replied, arching what would have been an eyebrow if Zephronians had them. Jack finally found his voice. You're supposed to be dead. Yes. Well, I apologize for the inconvenience of my continued existence, Lumina said dryly. Next time I'll try harder to perish according to schedule. Jack blinked. Sarcasm wasn't typically a Zephronian trait, nor was the subtle way she now slouched in her seat, a far cry from the rigid royal posture drilled into Zephronian nobility from hatching. Quick, Jack said. What's your opinion on human breakfast cereals? Lumina's eyes lit up. Frosted Sugar Loops are an abomination against sentient taste, but those little marshmallow bits in Lucky Galaxy Charms, pure genius. Though they get stuck between my fangs something terrible. Jack nodded slowly. It's really her, Crunk. How could you possibly know that from her cereal preferences? Crunk demanded. Because, Jack said, never taking his eyes off the princess, that's exactly what she said the first morning after I rescued her from that burning diplomatic vessel 5 years ago. The bar seemed to fade away as Jack and Lumina locked eyes, 5 years of shared history passing between them in a silent moment. You two know each other, Crunk said flatly. Of course you do, because my life wasn't complicated enough already. Lumina pulled her hood back up as a group of rowdy miners entered the bar. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. 10 minutes later, they were seated in the cargo hold of Jack's impounded ship. The junkyard dog wasn't going anywhere, but at least the security was minimal. A single bored guard who Jack had bribed with the promise of authentic Earth tequila, which was actually engine coolant with blue food coloring. But the guard wouldn't discover that until tomorrow's hangover. Start from the beginning, Jack said, perching on a crate opposite Lumina. Last time I saw you, you were boarding a transport to the Beta Centauri refugee camp. You promised to contact me once you were settled. I was planning to, Lumina said, her tail twitching with what Jack recognized as Zephronian guilt. But then I saw the news broadcasts. My mother declared war on humanity because of my assassination. I couldn't risk exposing you. Expose me. Jack's tone was incredulous. Your Highness, I was already court-martialed for disobeying orders to secure that diplomatic vessel. The brass thought I abandoned my post to chase pirates. I couldn't exactly tell them I was secretly harboring the Zephronian princess everyone thought was dead. Crunk raised all 4 hands. Wait, let me get this straight. You, he pointed at Jack, rescued her. He pointed at Lumina. During the incident that triggered full-scale war, rescued is a strong word, Lumina interjected. I had already neutralized the actual attackers when Captain Thornton's ship arrived. You were bleeding from 3 places and hanging upside down from a safety harness. Jack reminded her. I was implementing an advanced Zephronian battle meditation technique. You were unconscious, tactically unconscious, she corrected with a sniff. Jack turned to Crunk. The official story is that Drevlak pirates attacked her ship. That much is true. What nobody knows is that they were hired by someone within the Zephronian royal court. Which is why I couldn't go home, Lumina added, her playful demeanor suddenly serious. Someone powerful wanted me dead, and with the war escalating, I had no way of knowing who to trust. So you've been hiding among humans for 5 years? Crunk asked, sounding both impressed and horrified. How? You're not exactly inconspicuous. Lumina reached into her cloak and pulled out a small device that she attached to her wrist. With a shimmer of light, her appearance changed completely. Where the Zephronian princess had sat moments before, now there was a human woman with dark skin and curly hair. Holographic disguise, Jack explained. Military grade, another souvenir from my inglorious career. The humans on Beta Centauri took me in, Lumina said, deactivating the disguise. I learned their customs, their languages, their bizarre obsession with putting cheese on everything. She shook her head in bewilderment. Did you know they've developed 73 distinct varieties of pizza? The mind boggles. Why come out of hiding now? Crunk asked, voicing the question Jack had been afraid to ask. Lumina's expression turned grim. Because my mother is about to make a terrible mistake. The day of remembrance is approaching, the anniversary of my supposed death. According to my sources, she plans to use the occasion to announce the formal annexation of 3 human colony worlds as reparations for the war. That would restart the conflict, Jack said, his military training kicking in. Earth wouldn't stand for it. Precisely, Lumina nodded, which is why I need to return home to reveal that I'm alive, and that humans weren't responsible for the attack on my ship. Jack ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit from his academy days. You realize this is probably a suicide mission. Whoever tried to have you killed 5 years ago is still out there, likely still in a position of power. I'm aware of the risks, she said, her chin lifting with royal determination. But I've spent 5 years watching humans rebuild after a war that was partly triggered by my death. I've made friends, eaten questionable fast food, and even developed an unhealthy attachment to something called reality television. I can't sit by and watch another war destroy the people who took me in. Jack stared at her for a long moment, then turned to Krunk. Looks like we need to get the ship out of impound. With what money? Krunk demanded. That crystal might be valuable, but we can't exactly walk it into a currency exchange without raising every alarm in the sector. Jack grinned, the reckless expression that had gotten him through countless scrapes during the war. Remember Grix, the loan shark who's been after us? The one who threatened to turn us into exotic pet food? Yes, I recall, Krunk said dryly. Well, it just so happens his species has a sacred tradition. If you save the life of one of their offspring, they're bound by honor to grant you a request. Jack's grin widened. And guess who pulled Grix Jr. out of that trash compactor last month? Lumina looked between them. So we have a plan. We have a plan, Jack confirmed, then paused. Well, we have 1/8 of a plan. The rest we'll figure out on the way to certain doom. This is why I left the royal palace. Lumina sighed. The dramatic flair of humans is oddly addictive. Admit it, Your Highness, Jack said with a wink. You missed me, like a scale rash, she replied, but there was warmth in her reptilian eyes that hadn't been there before. Now, shall we go prevent an interstellar war? This, Jack whispered as they crouched behind an ornamental bush shaped like some multi-headed Zephronian deity, is not how I pictured meeting your mother. The plan, or the 1/8 of a plan they'd managed to cobble together, had gone sideways almost immediately. Getting the junkyard dog out of impound had been surprisingly easy. Grix had been so shocked by Jack calling in the life debt that he'd not only cleared their ship but thrown in a new plasma converter, as a gesture of goodwill, which Jack suspected was really Grix's way of ensuring they'd survive long enough for him to properly threaten them later. The trouble had started when they reached Zephronian space. Despite Lumina's royal override codes, the Border Patrol had flagged their ship for inspection. Apparently, Jack's name was still on a shoot-on-sight list from the war. Shoot on sight, Krunk had exclaimed when they'd been forced to abandon ship and continue on foot. You said you were court-martialed, not declared an enemy of the state. It might have slipped my mind that I also borrowed a Zephronian scout ship during my rescue mission, Jack had admitted. And by borrowed, I mean stole, and later crashed into their Royal Museum of Ancient Art. Now, after sneaking through the capital city using Lumina's knowledge of secret passages and Jack's surprisingly useful talent for mimicking Zephronian maintenance worker calls, they were within the palace grounds, specifically, hiding in the royal gardens as the Day of Remembrance ceremony was about to begin. The main hall will be packed with dignitaries, Lumina whispered, her scales shifting color slightly with anxiety, a trait Jack remembered from their time together. Mother always uses these occasions to remind everyone of Zephronian superiority. Great, Jack muttered. A room full of Zephronian elites who all think I murdered you. What could possibly go wrong? I still don't understand why I had to stay with the ship. Krunk grumbled through their comm units. After the Border Patrol incident, they'd decided someone needed to guard their escape route. I'm missing all the fun. Trust me, Jack replied. Nothing about this is fun. Shess, Lumina hissed. The royal procession is coming. They peered through the foliage as an elaborate parade of Zephronian nobles emerged from the palace's side entrance. Guards with ceremonial spears stomped in perfect unison, their scales polished to a mirror shine. Behind them walked various ministers and courtiers, their elaborate headdresses indicating their rank and function. And then came Queen Vixelia herself. Jack had seen her in military briefings and propaganda broadcasts, but nothing had prepared him for the imposing reality. The queen stood nearly 8 feet tall, her scales a deep royal blue that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her head crest was fully extended, adding another foot to her height, and the ceremonial armor she wore was etched with the names of battles won and enemies vanquished. She looks even angrier than I remember, Jack whispered. That's her diplomatic face, Lumina replied with a trace of humor. You should see her when the kitchen serves undercooked Zarak beetle. Any sign of who might have wanted you dead? Lumina's eyes scanned the procession. There, she pointed discreetly. Royal Advisor Trazik, he always opposed my diplomatic missions to human space. And see how close he stands to my mother now. He's gained significant influence in my absence. Jack studied the tall, thin Zephronian with the calculating eyes. He looks like the type who'd assassinate a princess before breakfast and not lose his appetite. He once had a servant executed for bringing him lukewarm tea, Lumina confirmed. Mother never entirely trusted him, but after my death, she seems to have relied on him more and more. So what's the play? We can't exactly walk up to the queen in the middle of her anti-human ceremony. Lumina's expression shifted to one Jack recognized all too well, the same look she'd had right before suggesting they escape a Drevlak pirate ship by riding garbage torpedoes through an asteroid field. Actually, she said, that's exactly what we're going to do. Before Jack could protest, Lumina had stood up and stepped out from behind the bush. Guards immediately spotted her, but instead of attacking, they froze in shock. Their training hadn't covered what to do when confronted with a supposedly dead princess. Taking advantage of their confusion, Lumina strode purposefully toward the procession, her royal bearing returning, as if she'd never left the palace. Jack scrambled after her, trying to look less like a notorious human criminal, and more like a dignified escort. "Hello, Mother," Lumina called out, her voice carrying across the garden. "I hope I'm not late for my own memorial." The garden fell into absolute silence. Queen Vixalia stopped mid-stride, her back stiffening. Slowly, she turned to face the voice she had never expected to hear again. "Impossible," the queen whispered, though in the silence everyone heard. "Improbable," Lumina corrected, continuing her approach. "But very real." The queen's guards finally recovered from their shock, forming a defensive line between the queen and the newcomers, spears leveled. "It's a trick," Advisor Trazik hissed, his hand moving to the ceremonial blade at his hip. "A human deception using holograms or clones." "I assure you I am neither a hologram nor a clone," Lumina said, stopping just short of the guards' spears. "Though I did have to use a holographic disguise during my 5 years of exile. Human fashion is surprisingly difficult to adapt to with a tail." Vixalia pushed past her guards, her eyes wide with disbelief and dawning hope. "Lumina, my daughter?" "Yes, Mother, it's me." The queen reached out a trembling hand, touching Lumina's face with such gentleness that Jack found himself suddenly fascinated by a nearby decorative pebble, giving them a moment of privacy. The moment was shattered when Trazik shouted, "Seize the human, he's controlling her mind." Jack found himself surrounded by guards, their spears inches from various parts of his anatomy he'd prefer to keep intact. Whoa, nobody's controlling anybody's mind here," he protested. "That's not even a thing humans can do. You're thinking of those creepy squid guys from Epsilon 9. "Silence, human," one of the guards growled. "You are in violation of 17 imperial decrees simply by breathing our air." "Mother, stop this," Lumina demanded, stepping between Jack and the guards. "This human saved my life when Advisor Trazik's assassins tried to kill me." A fresh wave of gasps rippled through the gathering. Trazik's scales paled to a sickly yellow. "Preposterous. Your Magnificence, this is clearly an infiltrator, using your grief against you." Queen Vixalia looked between her daughter and Trazik, centuries of political cunning, warring with maternal hope. "If you are truly my Lumina, tell me something only she would know." Lumina smiled sadly. "On my 10th hatching day, I snuck into the royal kitchens and ate an entire ceremonial cake, meant for the Arcturian ambassador. Mother, when he arrived and found no cake, you told him our people believe offering dessert to visitors is an insult, and he spent the next decade sending diplomatic missions with strict instructions to refuse any sweet offerings." The queen's composure cracked, her eyes welling with tears. "It is you." She pulled Lumina into an embrace that looked like it might crack ribs. Jack allowed himself a small smile, which vanished when Trazik shouted, "Guards, arrest the human spy. He has corrupted the princess's mind with human ideas." "Oh come on," Jack protested as the guards seized him. "If I could corrupt minds, don't you think I'd start with the loan sharks I owe money to?" "Jack is not a spy," Lumina said, pulling away from her mother's embrace. "He's a disgraced former captain who found me nearly dead after Trazik's assassins attacked my ship. He risked his career and his life to save me." "Disgraced is a bit harsh," Jack muttered. "I prefer unconventionally honored." "Take the human to the dungeons," Trazik ordered, his voice rising with desperation. "We'll extract the truth from him there." "You will do no such thing," Lumina said, drawing herself up to her full height. Though shorter than her mother, she suddenly looked every inch a Zephronian royal. "Jack Thornton is under my protection, and while we're discussing truth extraction, perhaps we should ask Advisor Trazik why he ordered Drevlak pirates to attack my diplomatic vessel 5 years ago." All eyes turned to Trazik, whose scales were now cycling through colors rapidly, the Zephronian equivalent of a panic attack. "These are serious accusations, daughter," Queen Vixalia said, her voice regaining its regal authority. "Do you have proof?" "Better," Lumina said with a smile that showed her fangs. "I have a witness. The Drevlak captain who took Trazik's money is currently serving time in a Centaurian prison. I visited him last month. He was quite eager to reduce his sentence by providing testimony. Jack couldn't help but admire her strategy. There was no Drevlak captain. They'd never been able to prove Trazik's involvement. But Lumina had clearly learned the art of the bluff during her time with humans. Trazik's reaction confirmed her accusation more effectively than any evidence could have. With a hiss of rage, he drew his ceremonial blade and lunged, not at Lumina, but at the Queen. "If I can't rule through you, I'll rule instead of you," he shrieked. Several things happened at once. The guards holding Jack loosened their grip in shock. Queen Vexalia reached for her own weapon, but was hampered by her ceremonial robes. And Jack, acting on instinct honed through years of combat training, broke free and tackled the advisor, sending them both crashing into an ornamental fountain shaped like a Zephronian sea monster. When they emerged, sputtering and soaked, Jack had Trazik's own blade pressed against the advisor's throat. "So," Jack said conversationally, "I guess this means diplomatic relations are still a bit tense." The throne room of the Zephronian royal palace was not designed for awkward silences. Its vaulted ceilings, adorned with murals depicting glorious battles against ancient enemies, seemed to amplify the uncomfortable tension. The assembled court stood frozen in various states of shock, outrage, and confusion, as Guard Captain Drav finished securing Advisor Trazik in ceremonial restraints that looked suspiciously like torture devices. Jack, still dripping fountain water onto the polished obsidian floor, stood before Queen Vexalia with what he hoped was a respectful expression, but suspected was closer to the face of someone who had just realized they'd left their ship's airlock open. "So the Queen said," her dual-toned voice somehow conveying both royal authority and maternal bewilderment, "you are the human who has been harboring my daughter for 5 years. "Harboring makes it sound so formal, Your Magnificence," Jack replied, trying not to fidget under her penetrating gaze. "I prefer to think of it as an extended interspecies cultural exchange program." "And what?" the Queen continued, her head crest expanding slightly in what Jack recognized as a sign of dangerous curiosity. "Has my daughter learned during this cultural exchange?" Before Jack could dig his diplomatic grave any deeper, Lumina stepped forward. "I've learned that humans are not the warmongers our history texts portray them to be, Mother. They are complex, contradictory, and capable of both tremendous compassion and baffling stupidity, often within the same minute." "Hey," Jack protested weakly. "This morning Jack spent 20 minutes arguing with our ship's navigation system because it wouldn't accept over there by the purple space cloud as valid coordinates," Lumina informed the court, triggering a ripple of confused murmurs. Queen Vexalia's eyes narrowed. "And yet this is the species you would have us make peace with. Beings who cannot even navigate properly." "Oh, we can navigate," Jack interjected. "We just prefer to maintain a healthy adversarial relationship with technology. Keeps the machines from getting ideas." A elderly Zephronian courtier, with scales faded to a dignified silver, leaned toward his neighbor. "The human appears to be engaging in what they call humor. I read a fascinating study on it during the pre-war cultural surveys. Apparently, they use it primarily as a mating ritual and stress response. I assure you, Counselor Zeth, I am not trying to mate with your entire court," Jack said dryly, causing the elder to nearly choke on his own tongue. Though the stress response part is spot on, the Queen silenced the resulting commotion with a raised hand. "Enough, Human Thornton, just Jack is fine. Or Captain, if you're feeling formal. Or hey you, which is what most of my creditors go with. You claim to have saved my daughter from assassins hired by my own advisor. Why should I believe you? Why would Trazik betray the crown in such a manner?" Jack glanced at Lumina, who nodded encouragingly. "Your Magnificence, Princess Lumina wasn't just advocating for peace with humans. She'd discovered evidence that Trazik was selling Zephronian military secrets to multiple species. Her diplomatic mission was cover for meeting with human intelligence officers who had tracked some of those leaks." The Queen's tail lashed in surprise. "Is this true, daughter?" Lumina nodded solemnly. "I had recordings, documentation, everything needed to expose him. That's why he couldn't let me complete my mission. When his assassins failed to kill me cleanly, he saw an opportunity, blame humans for my death and push us into a war that would distract from his treason. And you've had this evidence for 5 years without coming forward." The hurt in the Queen's voice was palpable. "I couldn't risk it," Lumina explained. "Not while Trazik had your ear and his network was still in place. But I wasn't idle during my exile." She reached into her cloak and withdrew a small data crystal. "This contains everything, the original evidence plus 5 years of intelligence gathered from across 3 sectors. Trazik wasn't working alone." The Queen accepted the crystal with a trembling hand. "To think we nearly went to war based on a lie," To be fair, Jack said, unable to help himself, our species probably would have found another reason to fight eventually. We're both rather opinionated. A shocked gasp rippled through the court at such blasphemy, but to everyone's surprise, the Queen's mouth twitched in what might almost have been amusement. Your human is rather forthright, daughter. You have no idea, Lumina sighed. He once told an Arcturian border patrol that their uniforms made them look like angry candy wrappers. They were neon orange with sparkly trim. Jack defended himself. What else was I supposed to say? Nothing, Lumina and the Queen replied in unison, then glanced at each other in surprise. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only when Trazik suddenly lunged forward. Despite his restraints, his scales flushed with rage. This changes nothing, he hissed. The humans will never accept peace. They've been building up military forces along the border for months. Jack frowned. No, we haven't. If anything, Earth's been scaling back fleet deployments since the armistice. Lies, Trazik thrashed against his bonds. Our intelligence shows. Your intelligence, Jack interrupted, probably comes from the same sources selling you those military secrets. Let me guess, reports of human dreadnoughts with some fancy new weapon that can penetrate Zephronian shields, conveniently requiring you to divert resources to countermeasures that your contacts just happen to sell. The advisor's sudden silence was confirmation enough. Classic arms dealer scam, Jack explained to the confused court. Sell secrets to both sides, then sell weapons to both sides by convincing each that the other is preparing to attack. My species perfected it centuries ago, before we realized it was more profitable just to build entertainment systems that break right after the warranty expires. Queen Vexalia studied Jack with new interest. You seem unusually knowledgeable about military matters for a simple salvage pilot. Jack winced as Lumina shot him a look that clearly said, you might as well tell her. I wasn't always a salvage pilot, Your Magnificence. Before my career change, I was Captain Jack Thornton of Earth's 6th Fleet, Special Operations. A human military officer, the Queen said flatly. In my throne room. Former officer, Jack corrected hastily. Very former. Dishonorably discharged and everything. I have the paperwork somewhere, probably being used to patch a coolant leak on my ship. He was court-martialed for saving me, Mother, Lumina explained. He disobeyed direct orders to abandon his patrol route and investigate the attack on my ship. When he found me alive, he could have handed me over to Earth's military as a valuable prisoner. Instead, he helped me hide. The Queen's expression was unreadable. And why would a human captain risk everything for a Zephronian princess? Our species were on the brink of war. Jack shifted uncomfortably. Because it was the right thing to do. Because innocent people were about to die for some bureaucrat's power play. Because I've seen enough war to know nobody really wins. He shrugged. Take your pick. Or maybe I just have terrible judgment, which is what my commanding officer claimed at my court-martial. He's being modest, Lumina said with surprising gentleness. Jack represents the best of humanity, their adaptability, their irreverence for authority, and their capacity for kindness, even toward hereditary enemies. You forgot my charming smile and excellent taste in second-hand spacecraft, Jack added, deflecting from the sudden emotion tightening his chest. Before the Queen could respond, the throne room doors burst open and a frantic guard rushed in. Your Magnificence, we've captured another intruder, an alien trying to access the impounded human vessel. That would be Crunk. Jack sighed as 4 guards dragged in his struggling Grulorian partner. I told him to stay with the ship. The ship was literally surrounded by armed guards. Crunk protested as he was deposited unceremoniously beside Jack. What was I supposed to do? Not get caught would have been a good start, Jack suggested. 4 arms and he still can't manage a simple getaway, Lumina teased. Crunk glared at them both. Next time, you two can sit in the ship, while I go have adventures in the alien palace. Queen Vexalia observed the exchange with growing bewilderment. Daughter, you appear to have adopted some very strange companions during your absence. I prefer to think of it as expanding my cultural horizons, Lumina replied. Humans have a saying, don't judge a book by its cover. I've found it remarkably applicable to interspecies relations. They also have a saying about fools rushing in where angels fear to tread, Jack muttered. Which pretty much sums up our current situation. The Queen rose from her throne, her full height imposing even from across the room. This day has brought many revelations. My daughter, alive. My trusted advisor, a traitor. and a human military officer who claims to have saved a Zephronian royal without expectation of reward. She paused, studying Jack intently. Tell me, Captain Thornton, if you had known saving my daughter would lead to 5 years of exile and disgrace, would you still have done it? Jack didn't hesitate. In a heartbeat, Your Magnificence. Though I might have packed more snacks. Your daughter goes through protein cubes like they're going extinct. It's my metabolism. Lumina defended herself. And you're one to talk. Remember the great pizza incident of last year? We agreed never to speak of that again, Jack hissed, acutely aware of the entire Zephronian court watching this exchange with fascination. The Queen's head crest relaxed slightly, and something that might have been the Zephronian equivalent of amusement flickered in her eyes. Perhaps, she said slowly, I have been hasty in my judgment of humans. Does this mean you're not going to execute us? Krunk asked hopefully. Because I have 3 clutch mates who would be very disappointed if I returned as a smear on the palace floor. It means, the Queen said returning to her throne, that I wish to learn more about these humans who have sheltered my daughter. Captain Thornton, I believe you called yourself a cultural exchange expert. Jack blinked. I don't think those exact words ever left my mouth, but sure. Let's go with that. Then you will demonstrate human customs for my court, the Queen declared. Show us why my daughter believes your species worthy of peace. Jack looked at Lumina in panic. A demonstration, right now, of human customs. Lumina nodded encouragingly. Just be yourself, Jack. That's terrible advice, Krunk muttered. Being himself is what got us into this mess. Jack took a deep breath, looking around at the expectant faces of the Zephronian court. Then with the resigned expression of a man stepping off a cliff to avoid a charging rhino, he stepped forward, and did the only thing he could think of. Your Magnificence, he said with a formal bow, have you ever heard of a human game called poker?
3 days after the throne room confrontation, which would later be immortalized in Zephronian historical archives as the Day of Unexpected Returns, but which Jack privately referred to as that time I nearly wet myself in front of alien royalty, the grand ceremonial hall of the palace had been transformed. Gone were the somber decorations for the Day of Remembrance. In their place stood an eclectic mix of Zephronian and human diplomatic symbols. Earth's flag hung alongside the royal Zephronian crest, and tables laden with cuisine from both worlds lined the walls. The effect was somewhere between a formal diplomatic function and a particularly ambitious intergalactic potluck. I still can't believe you taught the royal court to play poker, Lumina said, watching as a group of elderly Zephronian counselors huddled around a card table, scales shifting colors with excitement as they attempted to bluff each other. Jack grinned, resplendent in a formal Earth diplomatic uniform that had been hastily replicated for the occasion. I still can't believe your mother was so good at it. She cleaned me out in 3 hands. Zephronians are natural gamblers, Lumina explained. And Mother has been playing political poker her entire reign. You never stood a chance. At the center of the hall, Queen Vexalia was deep in conversation with the human ambassador, who had arrived that morning on an emergency diplomatic shuttle after receiving the news that the princess wasn't dead, B, there was not going to be a new war, and C, a disgraced former Earth captain was somehow now serving as an informal human cultural attaché to the Zephronian court. Ambassador Chen looks like she's about to have an aneurysm, Jack observed, watching the career diplomat try to maintain her composure as the Queen casually mentioned how Jack had taught her the concept of trash talk during their poker game. Can you blame her? Krunk asked, his forearms loaded with plates of food from the buffet. She spent 5 years negotiating the armistice, and you accomplished more in 3 days by breaking into the palace and teaching aliens to gamble. Don't forget almost drowning their top advisor in a decorative fountain, Jack added. That was key to my diplomatic strategy. Across the room, Trazik's former supporters were being quietly escorted out by the royal guard. The investigation into his network had moved swiftly, uncovering collaborators throughout the court. With each arrest, tensions between Earth and the Zephronian Empire eased further as both sides realized how thoroughly they'd been manipulated. Captain Thornton, a familiar dual-toned voice called. Jack turned to find Queen Vexalia approaching, Ambassador Chen following with an expression that silently begged him not to cause an interplanetary incident. Your Magnificence, Jack bowed, only slightly sloshing his drink. Lovely party. The, spiky blue things are delicious. They are ceremonial decorations, not food, the Queen informed him with what might have been amusement. But I appreciate your adventurous palate. That explains the crunching, Jack muttered, discreetly spitting something into his napkin. I have been discussing your unique situation with Ambassador Chen, the Queen continued.
It seems you remain technically a criminal in both our societies. It's my special talent, Jack agreed. Finding new and exciting ways to end up on government watch lists. Ambassador Chen looked like she was calculating how many years of diplomatic progress Jack might undo with each word. Indeed, the Queen said. However, as I was explaining to the ambassador, your actions, while unorthodox, have served both our peoples well. Without you, my daughter would likely be dead, and our empires might now be engaged in a second, even more devastating war. Jack shifted uncomfortably under the praise. I just did what anyone would do. No, Lumina said softly, moving to stand beside him. You didn't. Most humans would have turned me over to your military. Most Zephronians would have abandoned their career rather than help an enemy. You're uniquely stubborn in your decency, Jack Thornton. Before Jack could deflect with another joke, the Queen raised her hand. The hall immediately fell silent. People of Zephron, honored human guests, she began, her voice carrying effortlessly. 5 years ago, we believed we lost Princess Lumina to human aggression. Today we celebrate not only her return, but the revelation that her survival was due to human compassion. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the Queen continued. For too long, our species have viewed each other with suspicion and fear. We have allowed those who profit from conflict to drive us apart. Today marks a new beginning. With ceremonial precision, the Queen removed a glittering medallion from around her neck, the royal seal of Zephron. Jack realized, an artifact said to date back to the founding of their civilization. Captain Jack Thornton, the Queen proclaimed. For the rescue and protection of Princess Lumina, heir to the Zephronian throne, I name you Friend of the Empire. The first human to receive this honor in our history. Ambassador Chen's jaw dropped as the Queen placed the medallion around Jack's neck. The weight of it was substantial, both physically and symbolically. I don't know what to say, Jack admitted, the usual stream of sarcasm failing him for once. Then perhaps actions will suffice, the Queen suggested. Ambassador Chen and I have come to an agreement. Your criminal status in both our societies is hereby expunged. Furthermore, we require someone to serve as a liaison between our people, someone who understands both cultures and has proven their commitment to peace. Jack blinked. Are you offering me a job? We are offering you a purpose, the Queen corrected, and a chance to continue working with my daughter, who will head our new diplomatic initiative. Lumina stepped forward, her expression a mix of hope and challenge. What do you say, Captain? Ready for a new adventure? One that doesn't involve running from loan sharks, or sleeping in cargo holds. Jack looked between them, the regal Queen, the princess who had become so much more than a diplomatic charge, and beyond them to Crunk, who gave him a four-armed thumbs up, while continuing to stuff his face with actual food from the buffet. Do I get to keep my ship? He asked. The Queen's head crest twitched with what Jack was beginning to recognize as amusement. The vessel that my engineers have described as a flying death trap, held together by optimism and adhesive tape. If you insist, though I would suggest upgrades. Then I accept, Jack said, on one condition. Ambassador Chen made a small choking sound at the idea of placing conditions on a royal offer. Name it, the Queen said, seemingly unfazed. No more formal wear, Jack tugged at the tight collar of his diplomatic uniform. I'm pretty sure this outfit is cutting off blood flow to my brain. Lumina laughed, the sound so unexpected in the formal setting that several courtiers jumped. I think we can accommodate that request. Besides, I've grown rather fond of those ridiculous human Hawaiian shirts you favor. Excellent, the Queen declared, either missing or ignoring Ambassador Chen's look of horror. Then let us formalize this new alliance. With a gesture from the Queen, servants brought forward an ornate document on shimmering scale-like parchment. The Thornton Accord, she announced. Named for the human who showed us that our differences need not divide us. As Jack stepped forward to add his signature beneath the royal seal, he caught Lumina's eye. You planned this, didn't you? He whispered. I had 5 years to think about how to fix the mess Trazik created, she admitted. Though I didn't anticipate the poker tournament or the fountain incident. Nobody ever does, Jack replied with a wink, signing his name with a flourish that made Ambassador Chen wince and Queen Vixalia nod approvingly. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Jack and Lumina stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city. In the distance, the junkyard dog sat in the royal landing bay, already being swarmed by Zephronian engineers eager to study, and likely completely rebuild the battered human vessel. You know, Jack said, leaning against the railing, when I woke up 3 days ago, my biggest concern was whether we had enough fuel to reach the next space station. Now I'm a diplomat with a fancy title,
and jewelry heavy enough to use as an anchor. Disappointed, Lumina asked, her scales catching the light of the setting suns. Terrified, Jack admitted. I'm not exactly diplomatic material. What if I cause an interstellar incident the first time someone serves me food I don't recognize? You already did that, she reminded him. The decorations, remember? Ah, right. They lapsed into comfortable silence, watching the city lights come to life as darkness fell. I never thanked you properly, Lumina said finally. Not just for saving my life, but for everything after. Teaching me about humans, protecting me, helping me find the evidence against Trazic. Jack shrugged. You would have done the same for me. Perhaps, she agreed. But that doesn't diminish what you did. She turned to face him fully. My mother asked me, privately, why I chose to live among humans rather than seek asylum with one of our allied species. And what did you tell her? That humans are the only species arrogant enough to believe they can change the universe, and stubborn enough to actually do it. Lumina's expression softened. I told her that despite all your flaws, and there are many, humans never stop trying to be better than they are. It's infuriatingly optimistic and oddly inspiring. That's the nicest backhanded compliment I've ever received, Jack said, touched despite himself. I learned from the best, Lumina replied with a smirk. Inside the hall, Krunk's voice rose above the crowd as he apparently began teaching a group of royal guards some kind of Grelorian drinking song. Ambassador Chen could be heard desperately trying to intervene. We should probably go save your ambassador before she has a diplomatic breakdown, Lumina suggested. Or we could stay here a few more minutes and enjoy the chaos from a safe distance, Jack countered. Lumina laughed. 5 years among humans has taught me to appreciate that option. She leaned against the railing beside him, her shoulder touching his. So Captain Thornton, official friend of the Empire and interspecies liaison, what's our next adventure? Jack grinned, the medallion catching the light as he turned toward her. I hear the Arcturians are still upset about that cake incident from your childhood. Maybe we should start there. I've always wanted to see if they really do wear those ridiculous hats year-round. Diplomatic mission to insult Arcturian fashion. Sounds perfect, Lumina agreed with mock seriousness. Mother will be so proud. As the 3 sons of Zephyr Prime completed their descent below the horizon, Jack Thornton, former captain, former salvage pilot, newly minted diplomat, realized that for the first time in 5 years, he wasn't running from something. Instead, he was running toward a future that, while uncertain, promised to be anything but boring. And really, he thought as Lumina's tail casually curled around his ankle, what more could a disgraced space captain ask for?